Yeah, it all depends
The
on...
sun turn into darkness and the moon into blood before the terrible day of Yehovah? Not yet.
Haven't seen that one.
Not yet. But I think that what Peter's saying here to these guys is, this is the beginning.
Gotcha.
This is the beginning of what Joel was saying, that in those days is starting now. You're seeing it right now. But see, other people would sure be confused, because what he is saying is none of it had happened yet.
Right.
All they're seeing is people speaking in tongues, and only 11 of them. And they're saying, what is this? And he's saying, this is the fulfillment of the prophecy. Not the complete fulfillment of the prophecy, just the beginning. And as, you know, we know that Paul saw visions of the Messiah, and other ones as well, he told us. Peter sees a vision, just not long from now, just like the next chapter.
Right.
He sees a vision of the carpet coming down with all these unclean animals, and God saying, eat. What? I ain't eating unclean animals.
Right.
He wasn't talking about animals, he's talking about men.
Right.
So yeah, it is exactly what Joel said, just in a miniature form, but it grows. And as just within the next few years of this happening, it continues to grow and continues to grow until it will eventually reach that great and terrible day of Yehovah.
Right.
When the great day of tribulation comes. So you can see that I'm beginning to suspect in my own readings and my own understanding of this, that the Great Tribulation started 2,000 years ago.
Sure.
And has been
Building.
building.
It makes more sense.
And if you look, and I'm a historian. I mean, I got a degree in history, and I love history. You look at what was happening in the world, and the wars and the pestilences, and certainly lots of bad things happened before Yeshua came. But more bad things happened after Yeshua came.
That's true.
You got the bubonic plague, you got all this other bad stuff that's happening. But then when you get to the 21st century, from 1900 on, well, it gets really intense. 2 world wars.
Right.
The Jews being massacred. Pol Pot. Stalin. 15 million people died just between 1912 and 1917 in Russia from starvation and pestilence.
Right.
And that's why I think these days, and then you see all this in one day, the nation of Israel is reborn.
Right.
There's been no nation of Israel for 2,000 years.
Right.
Since AD 70. And then all of a sudden, and you know, a few years later, they take control of Jerusalem. Wow, this is like exactly what the prophet said would happen, and it's all happening within this 100 years. It's all happening within that 100 years. So we, looking today, we can probably pretty strongly determine we are that generation that Yeshua was talking about. This generation shall not pass until all these things are taking place.
Right.
We are that generation. It's pretty clear to me.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing these contractions, these labor pains getting more intense and closer together.
Right.
I mean, there was only a handful of years between World War I and World War II.
That's
true.
true.
20, 30 years.
Exactly. Well, in Vietnam, and then, I mean...
It just keeps going.
And going, and now our conflicts are more and more. And
we're basically still fighting the same conflicts.
Absolutely.
And they're about to explode into a third world war, I believe, with Iran and Russia, and all. It's all going to be centered around the Middle East.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about Israel. And it's just strange to me that so much attention in the world is focused on Israel. The United Nations, like 1/3 of everything they put out is about Israel.
Right.
The tiniest nation on the planet. Why?
Right.
It's a special time. There's a reason why this little tiny state the size of New Jersey is causing the world to stumble over itself.
Right.
There's a reason why. And it says so clearly in the Bible that this is the stone.
Right.
You're going to trip over it and hurt yourself.
Right.
You know, it's going to fall on you and crush you. It's the stone. It's just a stone. You're going to trip over this stone. It's this one little stone on the planet. You're all going to trip over it.
Wow.
We are.
Yeah.
We definitely are. But you can see here that Peter's saying, this is it now. And so that's why you have, you know, Christians throughout time saying the end is near. Because it is. Although it's a big end.
Near. Yeah, near is a
relative term.
Right.
Yeah. And then I think that's why that's another reason why the Apostle Paul was talking to the Thessalonians, because they had been hearing the word of the day of the Lord is like coming right now. Mm-hmm. And they had stopped working and were like just kicking back, waiting for the Lord to come. And he says, man, when I was with you, I told you it will not happen unless this happens first. That's not, the time is not now.
Right.
Get back to work.
Right.
If you don't work, you're not going to eat. And that's when he started preaching to them about, like, go back to work, get a job, get food and eat, and take care of the people who don't have enough food. Then now is not the time to stop working and just sit there waiting.
Yeah, they're like,
now is not the time.
Is that the cloud?
Yeah. So, but now could be the time.
Right.
And it's looking a lot more and more like it. Mm-hmm. But this begins to be fulfilled at the time of Yeshua. So when he says, I came to fulfill the prophets, he wasn't kidding. It started right then and there. He began to fulfill it. It begins to be the fulfillment of everything. And it just continues to be fulfilled and more fully. And that's one of the things that you see when you begin to dive into this Hebrew text and the Hebrew way of thinking and understanding how did they understand this, is you look at the fact that Hebrew thought is not like our Greek thought. You remember that Alexander the Great went and conquered the whole world and Hellenized them, turned them into Greek thinkers. We gotta outline things and start at the beginning and go to the end and try to understand it. You know, that's the way that Greeks think. Hebrews don't think that way. They think in circles. History is cyclical. What comes around goes around. Everything that's happened before, it'll happen again. So that you can see, when you look at the scripture from a cyclical fashion, you can see that the same exact thing keeps happening over and over and over and over. And you can see it clearly. And it's all about God and his people and the people who are not his people. This whole book is about nothing but that. God and his people. It's a family story. This is the story of a family, a very large family. And it's just amazing to see how it all fits together like that. And we can see it starting to come together now.
Right.
And it's just amazing. And so Peter begins preaching here and tells them, this is going to be, we'll save this for next time because I don't think we want to go too much further now. We've covered a lot of ground here. But he's basically saying, this is it, guys. And then he will begin to preach to them a little bit further. And that'll be really interesting. I think it's fascinating to read the sermons that the apostles gave.
Yes.
That is something that's very curious when you read that.
Right. Well,
because I've always wanted, and you've heard so many different churches saying we're going to go back to the Bible, we'll go back to Old Testament, apostolic Christianity. I don't think that hardly any of them really know what that means, because when you start seeing how did these behave, what did they do, how did they behave, how did they gather themselves, what did they say, how did they preach the gospel of Yeshua?
Right.
Not anything like we do now.
No.
Not even close.
No.
Not even close. And when you read the gospel that they are proclaiming, it's very different than the gospel that we are proclaiming.
Absolutely.
It's very different. And
It's
that's
very, very
where
different.
you start to get this deeper understanding of what is this gospel?
Right.
And what are they proclaiming? Because what we're proclaiming doesn't seem to be, they don't match. They don't seem to match at all.
Yeah, they don't mesh at all.
They don't match. So,
At all.
And you'll see two or three. One of the best ones is Stephen. He's about to get stoned to death. And he's giving a really awesome sermon to them. And they all start way back when they left Egypt. They start their sermons at the very beginning. And they carry it all the way forward. And then they tell them about Jesus at the very end. And right when they tell them about Jesus is usually when they get killed. Everybody's listening and going, yeah, this is great, man.
Yeah,
and then as soon as they mention Jesus,
Great. Now Jesus is the Messiah.
they
You're
get
over.
killed. But he proved their point all the way up until that. And there's even some very interesting things. And we'll look at this when we look at Stephen's sermon, that he's building a case. And they kill him before he gets to finish his case. But looking at what he had said, you can follow the pattern and you can see what he was about to say.
You can see where he was going.
He was just about to say, and they killed him. And when you realize what he was just about to say, it's like, oh man, this guy was brilliant.
Yeah.
He was brilliant. But anyway,
That's good.
good stuff, yeah. And we'll look at that. This gospel of Acts is amazing.